Yeah, and I'm going to have a piece on the site, pretty soon about. I think it's D'Amico Rhymes and the fact that he's not healthy, he's not 100%. And Bill Davis kind of came out today and said, he's not sure if he's going to be 100% for Atlanta on September 14th. So I think there's sort of a shift in organizational philosophy, and I think, before training camp started, they had the mentality that they were going to go forward with Kiko Alonso and D'Amico Rhymes. I think that shifted. I think it's now Kiko and Michael Kendricks, and it can happen in this league that quickly.
Yeah, and, I don't know how much you've seen these guys on the field because I guess a lot of them have been kind of nicked up. But I said that in the first hour that I think the indication now is that Kiko Alonso and Michael Kendricks might be your starters in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much assured they're going to be the starters in Atlanta. I think in the short term the plan hasn't changed all that much because they respect D'Amico so much. I think there's going to be a rotation. I think if he's 100%, whether that's week 2, week 3, week 4, whatever it is, I think he'll be in on early downs, and Kiko and Michael will be in there in the nickel as the coverage linebacker. So I think they're going to utilize all three. But, when you look down the line towards next season in 2 years, I think that's where the shift in philosophy has changed. And, part of it's the fact that D'Amico's 31 years old, and this is a league where, I always say 30 is a dirty word, so that's part of it. And an Achilles injury is very, very difficult to come back from, especially at that type of position, when you need such explosion, which you do at the linebacker position. So it's a concern. The health is a concern. And, I think they've changed their philosophy a little bit as far as measurables, because their big knock on Michael Kendricks was always that he was too small. And Bill Davis came out and said today, you don't need those big linebackers anymore because everybody's trying to get you in space, so you want athleticism, and that basically defines Michael Kendricks.
And it was a surprise to some that he was kind of the odd man out here when you're putting him up against D'Amico. And as you said, they have a lot of respect for D'Amico, but Michael's 24 years old, and to get rid of him for a guy who's coming off Achilles problems and aging, it seemed like that didn't add up. And I guess all along, do you believe Chip Kelly, or do you think if they had the right deal on the table, Kendricks was a goner?
I think he was a goner in the offseason. I think you can change your mind. I think that's what happened here. I think there's no question once they decided to bring D'Amico back and they made the trade for Kiko Alonso, I think at that point, Michael was the odd man out. But he's not healthy. Speaking about D'Amico, he's not going to be healthy most likely, at least early in the season. So things can change. And, they started to reassess the situation. They see how the league's going as a whole. And, maybe everybody's not running the read option like the Eagles are, despite what Chip Kelly says. But everybody is trying to spread the field, though. And almost every single team in this league now is in nickel more than they are in their base defense. So defenses are changing, very, very rapidly. And Michael Kendricks is sort of the prototype of what you look for in a three-down linebacker. And Davis even used that word, and that's a pretty good word, prototype. So I think it's bad news for D'Amico Rhymes, at least long-term.
A couple of years ago when Andy was here, linebacker was like a second thought. I mean, they didn't really care. Is this Chip Kelly showing you how important they believe that all four linebacking positions are? They locked up Graham, Barwin, obviously now Kendricks, and they traded for Kiko Alonso.
Yeah, but in defensive Andy, there's a big difference from running a 4-3 to a 3-4. If you're going to run a 3-4, your linebackers, they're the playmakers. It's the opposite in the 4-3, where your edge defensive ends are expected to be the playmakers. And you want more well-rounded guys. You want a traditional Mike linebacker that can go downhill and defend, the run. And you need a strong side guy that can handle the tight end. So it's differing philosophies, and you see it. The best example for years and years and years is Pittsburgh, and when Dick LeBeau was there, you always had those dominant outside linebackers, and now it's Baltimore. You just saw them in here last week. And even though they didn't play well, you can see the talent they have at the linebacker position with Terrell Suggs and C.J. Mosley and Elvis Dumerville. So if you're going to play the 3-4, you have to get impact players at the linebacker position.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. He has his first stab at the 53-man roster posted right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's go down a couple of them, John, and just get your opinions why one over the other. Obviously, the first one is Tebow and Barkley, and you also listed Barkley traded. But, you know, if it doesn't come down to Barkley traded, why Tebow over Barkley?
Well, I think it's more difficult if you don't trade him. I really do, because at that point you're saying Tim Tebow's a better option, and I think that's difficult to sell to your fan base, because it's pretty obvious that Matt Barkley's a better quarterback. Now, obviously, Tim Tebow has his fans, but I think everyone understands what he is, and he's a specialized player, despite what Chip will say at times. Matt Barkley's a better quarterback, and I think when you see the dearth of signal callers around the league, they will be able to get a late-round draft choice for him, and I think that's all they're looking for. They want to find a spot for Tim Tebow, and to do that, they have to spin Matt Barkley off, and I think they'll be able to do it. It becomes much more difficult. I think they almost have to keep Barkley if they don't trade him.
Let's go down to running back. You have Barner making the team. Was that a tough one for you to figure out who was the odd man? Who, when you ended up doing this, became your odd man out to keep Barner?
I didn't keep a ninth offensive lineman simply because I don't think the Eagles have a ton of depth. And if you let people like Dennis Kelly or David Mulk go, I think even if you need them in week 2 or week 3, they're going to be on the street and you can bring them back. So I think you have a little flexibility there simply because there's not a ton of talent depth-wise on the offensive line. And I don't think you have to be forced to keep that ninth guy. And at some point, you got to tip your cap to a guy like Barner and say, you've made this club. I mean, 2 punt returns in 2 consecutive weeks. And it helps because, as I said yesterday, all of a sudden, if you have a guy like that who's able to return kicks, that takes wear and tear off Darren Sproles. He doesn't have to be back there on punts unless it's a big situation. Same thing with Josh Huff on kickoffs. So I think it helps the team on a couple of levels.
Go to wide receiver here where, Jeff Mayle seemed to me to be the one odd man out here, and Ajira Tutu makes the team. 6 wide receivers in all. Is it Mayle against Ajira Tutu? Are they really the last 2?
Yeah, pretty much. I think Miles Austin's going to make this team. There's so much respect for his veteran leadership, both on the field and, even more so in the meeting rooms and things like that. I think he's important. They think he's important to this team moving forward, so I think he's going to be there. And then it comes down to those 2 guys. And to me, you take the special team stalwart, and, that's almost what has defined this team over the past year plus, and it's come back. We always say, the Eagles can't count on scoring all these special teams touchdowns. But they've done it in the first 2 weeks in the preseason, and maybe the reason why is because they're one of the few teams in this league that actively seeks guys who are really, really good on special teams. And we talk about them all the time with, guys like Brayman and Maragos. Maybe they can't play in the base defense, but they're great on special teams. And he's another guy like that, Ajira Tutu. So, it just makes him even that much better. And, you're not going to use your 6th receiver on the field catching passes, so you might as well keep the special teams guy.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com with us, looking at the 53-man roster he has posted right now. The tight end spot, you went with 3, and I guess, is there another intriguing prospect? Is there any practice squad guys that didn't make the cut?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a tight end, the key to everything is the health of Zach Ertz, and they tell us that they expect him back week 1. I've said from the beginning of that seems a little, pie in the sky to me if it were truly a sports hernia. And he obviously had surgery with Dr. Miles in Philadelphia, and that's a dead giveaway that was a sports hernia. So I think things shift if it's going to linger, and obviously if Ertz is not going to be there for, say, the first 3 or 4 weeks, then you have to keep another tight end. and then it comes down to Gleichart and Tomlinson. And Tomlinson, he raised some eyebrows when he had a lot of catches in the first preseason game, but I think the Eagles like the well-roundedness of Gleichart. I think they like him a little bit better. Either way, I think both of them will be on the practice squad if they think Zach Ertz is going to be back week 1, week 2.
You mentioned the offensive line. You went one light there. Dennis Kelly has been on the team the last couple of years. He's a holdover from the Reed era. David Molt got some starts a year ago, both guys on the outside looking in. Julian Vandervelde has not played very well, but you have him on the roster, and it seems that Gardner is the lock. So it looks like Tobin, Moffitt, and Vandervelde are the three guys. Is that line a suitable offensive line? That was their big problem with Andy a couple of years ago. The line was just a mess.
Yeah, I think the starters are fine. The depth is a concern, and it is. I went Tobin and Vandervelde because of their versatility. But you're right. Neither of them have played well in this preseason. And you can make a strong case and say Mulk especially has played better. And you can say Dennis Kelly has played better than Tobin. But I don't think Kelly has the versatility Tobin does, and that's what you look for in backups. Mulk and Vandervelde is a tougher battle. And, it's 50-50 to me. I think it could go either way. But the reason I went short is what I said. And Dennis Kelly's a perfect example. If you need somebody in week 2 or week 3, I think you're going to be able to bring a player like that back, because I don't think anyone else in the NFL is going to grab him and put him on a 53-man roster. So I think you have some flexibility when it comes down to something like that if needed.
Let's go to defense, where we talked a little bit, John, about how good they were up on the front three, too, with Cox, Logan, and Thornton. Those three guys right now, a very strong threesome. But a lot of depth there, too, with Curry, Bo Allen, Taylor Hart, Brandon Bear, who had a nice play in the game the other night. It seems that, they have a lot of depth and some pretty, talented players even behind some of the starters there.
Yeah, I think their depth is unbelievable at running back. I think it's unbelievable at inside linebacker. I'm not as high as you on the defensive line. I love the starters, as you mentioned. Fletcher Cox is probably the best. You could argue the best player on this team, offense or defense. I think Benny Logan's had the best preseason of any Eagles defender. And Cedric Thornton almost every year is probably the most underrated player on this team. So guys are great, but I don't see, I haven't seen much from Taylor Hart. I know the coaching staff loves him. He's remade his body. He works hard. He's gained about 20 pounds, but he really hasn't shown that much on the field. And Bo Allen is what he is. He's a decent run stuffer, so he's a guy who can help you on 2 downs. And I like Vinny Curry, obviously. I think everyone does as a pure pass rusher, but they jerk him around so much as far as, is he going to be playing a 5 technique? Is he going to be inside on the pass rush? Is he going to be playing outside linebacker? So I think that's been very, very difficult on him.
John, I want to look at the inside linebackers because Acho on the outside looking in, Najee good in. And to me, Acho is another guy who, pretty nice player, but for him not to make the team, you just mentioned how much you like the depth at inside linebacker. He's a pretty good player.
Yeah, he really is. And, he's probably ahead of a guy like Jordan Hicks at this point, but Hicks obviously is a rookie and a high draft choice, so you have to keep him around. And it shows you the depth of the team. And he's got a high ceiling as a player down the line. But when you're able to go into a game and have that, problem that we just talked about. If you're talking about, D'Amico Ryans isn't healthy, and all of a sudden you can put Michael Kendricks in as a starter, or vice versa, if Kiko Alonso goes down, to be able to put D'Amico back in. And even guys like Hicks and Good, it's one of the deepest position groups in the entire NFL, not just Philadelphia. It's a tremendously strong position for the Eagles.
John, secondary outside linebacker, we'll go there real fast because that's a spot where they've been thin. You got Marcus Smith in because it doesn't seem like they have a lot of options there.
No, that's it. And part of it is obviously you don't want to give up on a first-round draft choice this quickly. if you hear Chip Kelly talk about him at times, you can sense the frustration, almost similar to Earl Wolf when you kind of knew the writing was on the wall. But the difference here is obviously he's going to be able to get back on the field relatively soon. It might not be till week 1 or week 2 of the regular season. So it's not the long-term injury that a guy like Wolf had. And the bottom line is you don't have a lot of other options. You know, they're so desperate. We talked about Vinny Curry. They have to move him there. Brad Jones is probably, more of an inside linebacker, but now they have to play him outside because of all the issues. And, Travis Long, that injury was key because they were counting on him to be sort of that third linebacker on the outside rotation behind Connor Barwin and Brandon Graham, and he's not going to be able to be there.
John, in the cornerbacks, it's Maxwell Carroll, Rowe, E.J. Biggers, Jalen Watkins, and it seems that Watkins hasn't had a great camp, hasn't really stood out a lot, but not a lot of competition at the cornerback spot either.
No, I could see Denzel Rice beating out Watkins. That wouldn't surprise me. I went, with Watkins because he obviously is a former fourth-round pick, and they had high hopes for him. They wanted him to take that nickelback spot once Ja'Cory Shepherd went down. Hasn't really seized it. Really struggles in run support, which is his biggest issue. And he's going to be the fifth corner, if that. And I picked him over Rice because you can probably stash a guy like that on the practice squad because he's undrafted and maybe people around the league don't know how well he's played at training camp, and I think that might be the Eagles' thought process in that battle. But if they're concerned that some other team might take a run at a kid like Rice, they might put him on the 53-man roster. Interesting.
In the safety spot, we talked a little bit about yesterday. Chris Brzezinski, you have off. Mara goes on as special teamers, and Ed Reynolds, who had that big first game. Is Brzezinski and Reynolds in a battle?
I think, as I said, I think that's the position most likely that they're going to look at the waiver wire and pick somebody up off another organization because the depth behind Malcolm Jenkins and Walter Thurman is so scarce. And we talked about Marigo's heck of a special teams player, but you don't want him playing in your base defense. And, Ed Reynolds seems to be that guy that shows up on game day, but the coaches are not happy with the way he practices. And when you're a deep reserve, that's more important than showing up in week 1 of the preseason. They want to see the consistency from practice to practice. They haven't seen that yet. That's why, even though I put Reynolds in there for now, I think you might see him cut also, and they go to the waiver wire to pick up a fourth safety.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He's got his 53-man look, and he breaks it all down for you as the Eagles get ready to take on the Green Bay Packers this Saturday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. And, he talked a little bit today about, you mentioned Billy Davis, the prototype linebacker. Do you envision D'Amico being ready for that first game now?
I think they're going to be cautious because they do have such depth at that position. And they know, Kiko's online to be ready, and Kendricks is obviously going to be there. And if need be, a guy like Good can play. They like Tajay Good a lot as a defensive player, not just a special teams player. So I think they have a nice depth so you can afford to wait. But, if he's 90%, if he's close and ready, he's a veteran player. They have so much respect for him. They know he'll be ready, and he's the kind of guy that can make up if he's a little banged up. Talk about all the Mufasa references and things like that. They have a ton of respect for the leadership that Orion brings to this team. So I think if he wants to play, if he says he can play, they're going to play him.
All right, John McMullen, everybody. Go check out his stuff at 97.3ESPN.com. Of course, training camp and during the season, you can see more of John, his stuff there. And it's the Eagles on Saturday night against the Packers on your home for Eagles football, 97 ESPN. All right, John, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Mike.